Okay, so we've got the Genesis G70 3.3 with Brembo brakes. These are the front brakes. Switching out the pads is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. You can see there's one pad there, there's the other. Has this kind of spring retainer clip. And then you have these pins on the top and the bottom. And all you have to do is just hammer out the pins this way. And then you can pull the pads out. I'm using a little punch with it. This is a 3/16, it looks like, punch. I'm sure a variety of sizes will fit, but you just grab this, grab a hammer, and punch them out. So I'll show you how it looks once you get them both out. Okay, here's with the first pin out. As you can see with the Genesis, it has this little expansion ring thing, whatever you want to call it, that holds it in place on this end. And then here's the spring loose. We still have one more pin. So let's pull the other one out. Okay, and here's the second one out. And then, as you can see, this little spring just comes right off. It's very straightforward with Brembos. And then to remove the pads, you can just pull them straight out, but they've got a little bit of friction in them. So what you want to do is kind of work your way about halfway out like that, and then you can compress the pistons back into the caliper by kind of using this and pushing it against itself. So pull it out a little bit more and compress, there you go, the pistons back into the caliper, and then it just slides right out really easy. You can see this is a double piston setup right there. Now before you pull out the second one, you want to put on your new brake pad. We are using some G-Lock. I think these are the RS6 compound. I forgot which compound it is, but it's one of these. But it's the street pad. Oh, GS1, I'm sorry, GS1 compound. Now when putting them back in, it's really straightforward. You just want to copy what the stock configuration looks like. These ones don't have these little counterweights on them. These are supposedly for noise suppression. All you do is just slide it back in, just like that. These ones aren't really any thicker than the stock pads. I mean, I still have tons of life left on the stock pads, but usually your stock pads are so much more worn out than the new ones, so you have to compress the piston in. These ones we didn't really have to because they're, like I said, so new, and these new pads aren't really any thicker. So I've got a little bit of slop, and that's okay. Both the retainer pins and the spring are going to hold it in place, and then once you compress or press the brake pedal, these pistons will kind of compress back onto the pads and hold it in place. So anyway, so when you've got your new pad in over here, you're going to do the same thing with the other pad. Kind of work its way out. It's hard doing it one-handed, but you get the idea. Okay, and then once you've got it a little ways out, pull it back against itself and compress that pad in. There he goes. Okay, so that pad is in. The reason why you want to do it one at a time is because if you compress one piston, the other piston will kind of push against the other side, so you got to have a pad in there. Otherwise, if you don't have any pads, you push one side in and then the other side will go in, and you're just kind of going back and forth. Anyways, new pad in. And then it just kind of slides in there. Now, I'm going to clean up these pins, and then I'll show you how to slide the retainer clip and everything back in. It's really straightforward though. Okay, so we're going to put the replacement pin back in, but there's not enough room to slide this in after putting the pin in, so you have to kind of put them both, line them up at the same time. I can't do it one-handed, so I'll show you with it in there. Okay, it's very straightforward. You just slide it in. You can see on the pin it's got this slightly smaller diameter section, and that's where this little thing grabs onto it. Now I'm not going to push it in all the way just yet. You can if you want to, but I'm not going to. And then we'll put the other one in right here. And again, I can't do it one-handed, but you have to press the spring back down and then line it up and then slide the pin through on the other end. Okay, so they're both in. The second pin is a little more difficult to push in by hand because you have the tension of the spring going against you. So here it is. They're both pressed in. I had to tap this one in just a little bit just to get it to this point. Now the rest, because of that little expansion ring, you can't push in by hand. You have to use your hammer to get it in. Since there's not much room in here, what I've done is I just grab my 1/2-inch drive Craftsman and then set it up against there. And then I grab my hammer and just kind of gently tap it in so it's flush. I'll show you afterwards. Okay, so I just hammered it in like that, and you can see it's back where it used to be, and we'll do the same thing on this bottom one too. Okay, so now they're both in. As you can see, this spring is basically lines up all by itself. That's all there is to it. When I get back in the car and press down the brake pedal, it's going to kind of drop to the floor because I still have all this gap right over here because the pistons have been set back into the caliper so much. We got to squeeze them out again. So that's the front caliper. So I'll show you how the rears look. It's the exact same concept. Okay, and now with the rear calipers, they are also Brembos on the G70. And as you can see, you cannot turn the wheel, obviously. So you've got a little bit less room to work with. So, but the concept is exactly the same. You've got your little pins that hold it in, and then you have your little spring clip thing, whatever, that presses make sure the pads are seated. So, exact same concept. We grab our punch, exact same size punch. We're using the 3/16. And then we'll go ahead and just hammer them out. And I'll show you how it looks with those out. Okay, so we got the first one partially hammered out. Once you get to this point, you can just kind of give a little bit of elbow grease, maybe. It's tough with one hand. And kind of work it out. Alright, I need two hands to do it. Hang on. Okay, there you go. You just pull it out once it's halfway through. You don't need to keep hammering it. You just pull it out. Two hands. But the exact same anatomy. You've got that little expansion ring on there. The pins are probably a little bit smaller. And there you are. You've got the spring. It's a little bit more loose, and then we just have this other retainer pin, or whatever pin that will press out. Okay, so both are out, and then this thing just lifts right out, and there are both my pins. And then again, exactly the same as the front. You just kind of wiggle them out a little bit at a time, and then once you're about halfway out, then you go ahead and use this same pad to press in the caliper piston. So I'm kind of pushing it, or pulling it, I mean, towards me. There you go. See, I'm just pull towards you, and it compresses it. So now we've got a bit more room, and it slides in and out much easier. And then we just slide it back out. So there's that. Then we'll put our new pads in. Always try and keep the same orientation as far as the little squealers are concerned, these little things. This is just kind of a little metal bracket. And once the pad gets worn down to that point, this starts scraping against the rotor and it makes a loud squealing noise. These aftermarket pads don't have that, so it doesn't matter. But if you do have ones that have that, make sure it goes on the outside. So yeah, anyways, let's put this new one in. These ones are a little bit thicker than the OEM pads, so you have to compress the piston. Let's push it in to where it lines up roughly as best you can with the little holes. Now with this one, we'll pull this out again about halfway, and then I'm going to push it to compress the piston. There it goes. Pretty easy. The rears are single pistons. Well, I guess they're dual pistons, whatever. There's one on each side. put in our new pad. Slides right in, about like that. I'm going to clean up these pins and we'll push them back in. Okay, pins are nice and clean, as you can see. And we just push them in the same way that we took them out. And it kind of line it up about halfway. Then get our spring back. Kind of set it in place. This is tough to do one-handed, but you get the idea. Okay, so the same thing, we push it in. I'm going to have to use two hands, maybe. Oh no, I was able to do it with one. Sort of. There you go. So yeah, now we're ready to push these in all the way. There's a little bit less room to work with, but okay, anyway, since there's less room to work with, it's harder, but the concept is still the same. I've just been using this thing, hammer it in until these pins are as flush as you can get them, and then you're done. And that's all there is to it.